Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education of Bernards Township. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education. Notice of the time and the place of this meeting was provided, and copies of that resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the Township Clerk, and a copy of the notice was posted on the bulletin board of the Board of Education offices in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Due to the public health emergency in the state of New Jersey as declared in Executive Order 103, the board will be suspending normal meeting procedures this evening and conducting this virtual meeting. Directions for accessing the virtual public meeting were posted on the district website, www.bernardsboe.com. These same directions were posted at our intended but unavailable meeting site. We very much welcome input from the public. Because this is a virtual meeting, public comment will be handled in one of three ways. Public comment method number 1, which is the preferred method, is the full video via Zoom. When you're ready to make a public comment, join the Board of Education meeting via the Zoom link posted on the district webpage, www.bernardsboe.com. Please plan for your participation by turning your camera and microphone on, dressing appropriately, maintaining a proper background setting for your camera's view, having a quiet space, muting the YouTube live stream of the Board of Education meeting when you are speaking so that there is no feedback with your participation in the Zoom meeting. You will be placed in a queue and admitted to the meeting when it is your turn to make a public comment. Once you see that you are admitted to the Zoom call, it will be your turn to make your public comment. Please begin your public comment by stating your full name and address. After making your public comment, please exit the Zoom meeting so the next person waiting may make their public comment. Public comment method number 2, dial in via Zoom, which is voice only. When you are ready to make your public comment, join the Zoom meeting using the dial-in phone number and meeting ID posted on the district website. Please plan for your participation by having a quiet space, muting the YouTube live stream of the Board of Education meeting when you are speaking so that there is no feedback with your participation in the Zoom meeting. You will be placed in a queue and admitted to the meeting when it is your turn to make a public comment. Once you see that you are admitted to the Zoom call, it will be your turn to make your public comment. Please begin your public comment by stating your full name and address. After making your public comment, please exit the Zoom meeting so that the next person waiting to make a public comment can be admitted. Public comment method number 3, if the preferred full video of the public comment is not an option for you and the dial-in method fails, please follow these directions to submit your public comment. Starting at 7 p.m., email your comment to btconnect@bernardsboe.com or text your comment to 908-292-3047. Use public comment as the email subject or the start of the text message. Indicate your first and last name and your address. This is required for your public comment to be included in the record. Regardless of whether you use methods 1, 2, or 3 for public comment, please note that public comments are limited to a maximum of approximately 3 minutes if read aloud. Individuals are permitted a maximum of 1 public comment during public comment on agenda items. Individuals are permitted a maximum of 1 public comment during public comment on non-agenda items. Public comments submitted via method 1 and 2 will be processed first. Then comments submitted by method 3. An individual's comments made using method 1 or 2 will not also be read into the record through method 3. The Board of Education reserves the right to limit the length of time allotted for public comment. We're going to continue this evening with what we've been doing for the last several months, which is 45 minutes in the agenda items public comment, and then, if needed, another 45 minutes in the non-agenda items. No public comments will be accepted before 7 p.m. or after item 19, board forum on the agenda begins. And just a reminder, public comment portions of our agendas are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather they are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. The board may or may not respond to the public comments. Any board responses to public comments will generally be addressed during board forum or during committee reports. However, all comments are considered and will be investigated and addressed as appropriate. Please be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when providing comments. Comments may not be abusive, obscene, threatening, or irrelevant. Please understand that students and employees have specific legal and privacy protections. The board is not permitted to respond in public to comments about students or employees. Please also understand that the board will not be responsible for the content of comments made by members of the public. Members of the public are cautioned that they are commenting at their own risk, and any personally directed statements they make may subject them to legal liability to the affected individual. If it is necessary for the board to go into executive session at the end of the meeting, we will provide an estimated length of time for the session and whether any action is anticipated to be taken upon returning to public session. And with that, we are up to, well, I guess we need a roll call, Mr. Mclaughlin.
Ms. Beckman?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Ms. Hira?
Here.
Mr. Markarian?
Here.
Mr. Syatt?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Madam President, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. And with that, we are up to our student representative, Juliet. Good
Hello.
evening.
Hi, good evening. The biggest recent change for students was the transition back to school 4 days a week instead of 2. This has gone really well. I had some friends who said they felt like it was the first day of school again because they were so happy to see more of their friends in all the classes they shared. This transition makes them a lot more excited to go back to school every day because now they get the chance to chat with peers and actually feel like school is social again. There were some comments about the hallways feeling a bit crowded at times, but students weren't too anxious because people kept moving, so there wasn't really prolonged contact. At the same time, the required online hours are still manageable for virtual students, so it really felt as though the administration really weighed both groups, both in-person and virtual, and focused on the best first step for both, which we were really appreciative of. In addition, on the virtual front, Ridge Drama is continuing to make the best of this year with their Showtime event this coming weekend. We're looking forward to the future as things gradually return to normalcy. Thank you.
Thank you. Some happy news to hear. Any questions for Juliet? Okay, seeing none. Our next item is a board presentation. We have several distinguished guests from our school administration here to join us. So am I turning it over to Dr. Lazovic or Mr. Markarian first?
I can certainly introduce folks for tonight. I'm really pleased to be able to have with us Dr. Lazovic, our high school principal, our director of school counseling, Ms. Stephanie Smith, our assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, Ms. Fox, as well as 2 assistant principals from Ridge High School, Mr. Scott Graber and Ms. Cheryl Howard. They're all here tonight to share with us an update on the Ridge High School master schedule progress and programs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lazovic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Thank you, Ms. Gray. Mr. Markarian, am I able to share my screen, please?
You are.
Thanks. Oh, thanks, Ms. Fox. Everyone able to see the presentation? Excellent. Well, thank you all for having us here. My understanding is that this presentation is a long time in coming, and we are excited to be here to talk about rotate and drop and the exciting things that are currently happening at the high school, as well as what will be happening for September. So I did, as Mr. Markarian said, I'm happy to be joined by 2 of our assistant principals, our director of guidance, as well as our assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction, who's also serving as our tech master. I see. So without further ado, jumping right in. We want to make sure that everyone is clear in this presentation that the biggest news, the most exciting news, is that we are switching to rotate and drop for September 2021. So the rest of this presentation is focused on the idea that how do we start to have a collective conversation in the community so that everyone understands the different pieces of rotate and drop, the benefits of rotate and drop, and some of the challenges, so that we are best prepared for September to move in and be successful supporting our students, their families, and certainly our staff. So as far as the rationale as to why we would look to change our schedule, the schedule of a building is an operational piece that really sits almost unnoticed oftentimes in a school, and goes unrecognized for the influence that it has on our students, on our staff, and on their ability to succeed and grow as individuals. As we talk about this, our big push with everything, the schedule included, is this idea of wellness. And with that, we had a focus question: how do we take a school like Ridge, high-performing high school, and make it even better, with this focus being on wellness? And so, for a little bit of history, I'm going to turn over, seeing as I've been here all of 7 months at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Fox to kind of get us to how we got to today.
Thank you, Dr. Lazovic. So good evening, everybody. I'm really happy to be here tonight and talk about some of our planning for the future tonight, and this initiative we are in fact excited to be talking to you about tonight. So as most of you here know, the district has been looking at some type of a change in our instructional schedule at the high school in particular throughout the last 8 to 10 years. And the reason for that, as Dr. Lazovic said, has really been consistent throughout this time, particularly so in the last 4 to 5 years. We've been looking towards this change because we believe it would create a better school environment for students and for staff. And that's really it. That's the focus. All of the changes you will hear us talk about tonight all contribute to what we think is an improvement in wellness for students and staff. In our research that we've conducted over the last 4 to 5 years and even longer, visits to other districts, I've never encountered an educator operating in some type of a block schedule at their high school who said they would wish to go back to a 9-period day or 40-minute classes. And universally and across the board, the reasons they cite relate to wellness, a decrease in stress, better ability to manage workload, and so on. So most of what you will hear tonight will relate to that and how we feel that this change will provide that for Ridge High School. The last year has impacted our progress towards this goal, no doubt. First, the pandemic certainly halted the progress we were making towards implementation. But more significantly, we've experienced a change in leadership at Ridge High School. And one thing I know for certain is that a strong visionary leader is needed to move a school through this kind of a change. We're very lucky that Dr. Lazovic joined Ridge High School this past summer, not only to lead us through the pandemic, but because he is that kind of a leader. He's visionary, and he also has experience in another district in making this kind of a change. So we're certainly going to benefit from that. With that, I'd like to turn this presentation back to Dr. Lazovic to give you some more of those details.
Thanks for those surprising and kind words. Looking forward to moving into the meat of the presentation. So, based on, as Ms. Fox said, this focus on wellness, the first question we want to answer for everyone, since we've made the decision to go to a rotate and drop, is why? And programmatically speaking, rotate and drop allows students to focus more specifically while reducing stress. There are fewer classes that they focus on each day. Helps, as Ms. Fox mentioned, balance their workload. They have different experiences as each class that they have, depending on the day, appears at a different time. And this allows for numerous benefits as we move forward. And as Ms. Fox mentioned, and I've had that same experience, this idea of longer instructional periods, or moving away from what we call a period to what we call an instructional block. And this idea that educators in all the schools that were visited, both by folks here in Ridge and in my experience in other districts, once the change has been made in instructors, educators sit into what an instructional block allows them to do. I've never heard anyone who asks to go back. The other piece is that, and this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later, but a bunch of the excitement around rotate and drop is that it helps us create opportunity. By shifting the schedule that runs our day-to-day operation, it removes a number of conflicts. It provides for this idea, which we're going to talk about, of a unit lunch opportunity period, provides time within the day for staff development on a regular basis, which is something I know we've wanted to bring into our schedule for a long time here at Ridge. It allows for all manner of building-wide and grade-level activities that we have not been able to have before. And so there's a great deal of excitement as we move toward rotate and drop. And that's the why. So how are we getting ready for this change for September? I have to take a pause and again thank Ms. Fox for her kind words, but I have to thank our staff, not just the the folks that you see on this presentation, I'll hear from in a little bit, but our teachers. In the midst of the pandemic, and as you heard from Juliet, they did a phenomenal job, as they have been all year long, today, making it seem like a first day of school and letting students reconnect and moving forward instruction under new constraints in a new environment. We're all still highly focused on health. They make magic happen every day. But while they're doing all of that, we have volunteers that are representative of every operational group and department in the building who are giving of their time outside of the school day to help us prepare for this change. They meet weekly, and they've divided themselves beyond the core group into 4 separate focus groups, which we're going to hear from in a little bit. The first focused on instruction, the second on operations, the third on opportunity, and that last group on wellness. And so I definitely want to thank the staff members for truly working hard to get us ready for September. Now, rotate and drop is a formula. It's a type of schedule, but the specifics of every rotate and drop from one school to the next can vary. They can be different from one to the next. What we want to make sure we focus on here at this meeting, since we've made the declaration that we're moving, and we've talked about the why we're moving that direction, is just a base understanding of our version of rotate and drop. And again, this is something over time that, as we live into, becomes second nature to our staff and our students, as well as our families, but may at first glance appear a bit complicated or overwhelming. I just want to reassure everyone as we go through this over and over again between now and September that this will become second nature. This is one presentation of many that we have planned, not really to the board specifically, but to parents and our students between now and September. Focusing once a month on specific smaller groups of information, topics of information, so that the community can really settle in one piece at a time and take time to understand each piece of a rotate and drop schedule. So again, for tonight, the basics of our schedule. 3 different sections of a school day. We have our morning academic section, as you see, which is comprised of 3 academic blocks. We have our afternoon session, which is also comprised of 3 academic blocks. And then you have in between those 2 academic sessions, this idea of a unit lunch and opportunity period. And that is how the day is structured, 3 significant pieces. So students, we're in the midst of it now. I'm in Ms. Smith. I know we had our first day of 8th grade meetings with parents and our students that will soon be our freshmen. It's an exciting time. As we go through this process, and our counselors have done an unbelievable job of not only working through pandemic and the normal scheduling challenges, but transitioning to this idea of rotate and drop. We want to ensure everyone that students have always selected 8 academic courses, if you will. They still have those 8 selections. And as they work through their 4 years, we've really opened doors with this schedule rather than diminished opportunity. As an example, what you're looking at now is just by category, the types of classes that could fill those 8 slots for any student. English, health and physical education, math, science, social studies, world language, and then this combination somehow of electives, study halls, and other classes that are obviously individualized depending on the student that we're talking about. But so they still select 8 academic offerings each year. And what we will then do, as I mentioned, is we will take those 8 academic offerings and we will put them into slots either in the morning or the afternoon session. That all happens through the magic of our counselors. They wave their magic wands and go behind a curtain. And we do not tell you all the tricks that they have up their sleeve that make our master schedule finally come together before September. But it is nothing short of magic, and I'll see Ms. Smith grinning. It truly is a group of wizards coming together to make this happen. But those 8 selections that every student makes goes through our scheduling process and then is actually slotted either in the morning session or the afternoon session for the remainder of that course, the duration of that course. What it ends up looking like, and Ms. Fox recommended we use some colors. I hope that these colors meet your approval. If you look at the morning session of this hypothetical student, we shall call him Russ. In the morning, Russ has math, an elective, English, and science. Those 4 classes rotate through the morning session. And what ends up happening, as you can see here, is that we have 4 days, A, B, C, and D. And on any given day, Russ will only attend 3 of the 4 morning session classes. So as an example, on the very first day, day A, Russ's science class would drop out. He would not meet with science. Instead, he meets with math, his elective class, and time block 3. And then science would, across the 4 days, rotate through the schedule, going from the course that is dropped to the first of the morning session courses, to the middle of the morning session, and eventually to the end of our morning session. Every class follows the same rotation such that every single class in a 4-day rotation meets 3 times, dropping once. The same is true of Russ's afternoon session. You notice that on day A, his social studies class is the first period of that afternoon session. On day B, it's the middle of his afternoon session. On day C, it's the end of the day for him. And on the final day, day D, social studies actually drops off. And so at the same time through any given day, the afternoon session and the morning session are both rotating as we move from day A to day D. So we talked about that middle piece, that third piece. It's wedged in between our morning session and our afternoon session. There is what they call a unit lunch, or what we're calling the opportunity period. It's a single chunk of time that separates both and allows for a great deal to happen. Provides a chance for the entire school to take a break, but also to engage in all manner of activities that we've never been able to work into the school day before. The other piece, which makes rotate and drop so popular, is that it allows for what we call extended classes. Classes that once every cycle, once every 4 days, will increase in their time. So we take an already increased instructional block, increase it even more. And this has all sorts of impact positively so for our scheduling, as well as for students who are trying to maximize those 8 slots that we talked about before. So the unit lunch, one long period, but divided up into 2 halves. And that's important because that's part of where the magic comes from as we talk about extended classes. If we go through that morning session again with the same 4 classes that Russ had earlier, you'll notice that science goes from dropped to the first period of the morning, the second period, the middle of the morning. But when it hits the end of the morning session, it abuts that unit lunch. And as an extended period, what ends up happening is that students in that science class, through the passing time and the first half of the unit lunch, stay in that class for extra instruction. This allows us to offer these extended classes, more instructional time, things like science and labs, without impacting a student's ability to choose 8 courses or being forced to marry those courses to either health and physical education in the past or study halls. Now, what I will say is we have multiple levels of courses. We are a rigorous academic institution as a high school here in New Jersey, and there is a small population of some of our classes which actually double up. And those science courses to start would still be married to a study hall, but it dramatically reduces over 80% of our offerings so that the students in those classes no longer have to give up that period simply as a matter of the operation of the schedule. Doesn't mean they can't choose a study hall, but this is how that morning session would work. If you drop this into an entire schedule, you'll notice that science in the morning rotates and then extends. The same way social studies in the afternoon rotates, but also extends. And these are just hypothetical examples of courses, but the way the students operate when an extended class hits that extra lunch, rather than having a full unit lunch off, they have half of that as for instruction and the other half, obviously, for other activities as well as eating. So in a nutshell, that's the basics of rotate and drop and where we will be for September. Again, we're planning question and answer sessions and open Zooms for parents and students as we move through into the spring, so we can dive more deeply and answer questions about these for the very people that this schedule will be serving. But that for this presentation, given the lack of interaction with the public and our students, tried to keep it as simple as possible and define exactly what we here at Ridge will be using as a rotate and drop schedule. So the question is, how do we move from February 22nd to September and a rotate and drop? And there are a number of things going on. And to kick it off under the instructional setting, I'm first going to turn it over to the wizard I spoke about earlier, Ms. Smith, to talk about what we're doing to ensure that the schedule actually is prepared and works.
Thank you, Dr. Lazovic. I'm excited to take a moment tonight to talk to you all about a project that we have endeavored for the past several months, which is our mock schedule. So to help us prepare everything that Dr. Lazovic has described from a very technical standpoint, what we do is we actually run a simulation exercise and build a mock rotate and drop schedule in our student information system, our Genesis database. So normally what we're doing right now in the school year is collecting all of the requests from our students, and then we proceed into our master scheduling timeline. And so that process involves about 25,000 different course requests, and we work the scheduler to really optimize and maximize these requests. We keep in mind teacher schedules and room utilization. So we're constantly running all three of those analyses at the same time and looking to make sure that we can give as many students their full slate of requests as possible, as close as possible as we can get it. That's always the goal. So for the mock schedule, we did exactly that. And so we mimicked that process over the past couple months. And this has really been a collaborative effort between all of the department supervisors, the administrators, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge and thank Mrs. Michelle Vidiello, who is our district database manager at Ridge High School, excuse me. She has been integral and invaluable in this process, and especially in this simulation exercise. So the goal is really to familiarize ourselves and enable us to be as creative as possible with all of the different aspects that Dr. Lazovic has mentioned, particularly room usage, teacher schedules, and most importantly, filling student schedules to maximize their requests as much as possible. So we feel confident from our work that with some creativity, we'll have a successful year ahead of us with the rotate and drop. Along with that actual technical process of running a mock schedule, a huge piece of how we get there, and that question that Dr. Lazovic posed is the curriculum and assessment piece. And so I'll turn it over to Mrs. Fox to address that.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. So for curriculum and assessment, I would consider this, a large undertaking, but at the same time, just what we do annually anyway. So we will devote a good portion of our regular summer curriculum work to preparing for this change. In fact, some of the work that we will do and are currently, and are doing now will be informed by our experiences of the past year. We've spent a significant amount of time over the course of the last year and throughout last summer's curriculum projects, prioritizing standards and working flexibly with our pacing in response to the pandemic. So some of the reflection and the work that teachers have done over the past year and with their supervisors will be useful as we move into the block schedule and we look at pacing and we look at pacing guides and we look at our curriculum and we consider priority standards and different ways of approaching instruction. Along the way, and I think Dr. Lazovic will speak about this in a few minutes, will include some professional development related to this as well. And so these will be ongoing discussions we start now and continue throughout the summer and really continue next year. Dr. Lazovic.
Thank you, Ms. Smith and Ms. Fox. So as I mentioned before, we have those 4 areas of focus. So you heard from the instructional area, but one of the nice pieces of or impacts of moving your schedule is that it makes you re-examine all of your operations when it comes to the operation of a school district and our school building. And in this case, Ms. Howarth is with us, and she has been running the focus group of committed staff members who've been diving into this idea of what operational changes are necessary to make this a success. So Ms. Howarth.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lazovic. I'm excited to be here this evening to share some of the work and some of the discussions that our subcommittee has been working on in terms of the daily operation piece. As you can imagine by the title, it is a daunting task as it does encompass a lot in terms of the daily operations of the building. The staff has been amazing. As Dr. Lazovic said, they're donating their time after school because they believe in this. They want to see the change and they firmly believe that it's what's in the best interest of the students. So it's really exciting. We do meet weekly. And as you can imagine, every week that we're discussing new topics, new questions come up that we add to the to-do list. So tonight I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the topics that either have been discussed or continuously being discussed. And in the next few months coming, we do hope to have some official recommendations in terms of all of these topics. So the big one that that we're discussing is the idea of scheduling. So scheduling more in terms of what it looks like for a snow day. The group is deciding there's really two options for a snow day, and you either drop the day or you bump the day. And to give you an example, if we had a 1-day snow day that happened to fall on a B day, if you drop the day, that means the next day when you return to school, the B day doesn't meet, it's been dropped, and you would pick up on day C. Bumping just simply is the opposite of that, meaning if the snow day fell on a B day, the next day that school is in session, you would bump the day and you would actually meet your B day classes. The idea behind the rest of these schedules, the abbreviated day, the assembly days, is just so that come September, we have all of these schedules in place for the teachers, for them to be able to plan ahead and to kind of know what each day will look like. Should we have an assembly? Should we have an abbreviated day prior to Thanksgiving or the winter break? We're also discussing ideas of a special schedule for the first day of school and the first day of semester 2, so that teachers and students may potentially see all of their classes on those days, given that generally semester 2 does bring schedule changes. And we're talking about the pros and cons that could bring for Ridge High. You can go to some of the other topics that we've been discussing. We've been discussing professional development needs for the staff, which is in line with what many of our district superintendents are discussing as well. And I know what Dr. Lazovic is going to discuss in a few moments. We've been looking at the student handbook as a lot of it, the wording of a lot of the policies in the handbook are congruent with a 9-period day. So some of those need to be just reworded so that they reflect the rotate and drop schedule. They've been discussing the impact of duties for staff. So our secondary staff by contract do have to have a non-teaching duty, which for the high school is study hall, monitoring the cafeteria during lunch periods, or monitoring the hallways during a specific period to ensure that we are safe and secure within the high school. Now that we have a unit lunch where there will have to be monitoring occurring, does that impact the duties for staff? And if so, how? So we look forward to also working with the lunch group to discuss that. Couple of impacts that could potentially come for our seniors that we are discussing as an operations group would be that impact on late arrival, early dismissal. So a lot of our seniors look forward to that privilege as they become seniors, but given that the same period will not, or the same class will not meet both first block and last block, what does that look like for our seniors? And is that something that we can continue to provide? Same thing with senior internship. How can we make that possible, given that each day, every 4 days, the students have a bit of a different schedule? And we're also looking at some new ideas that are kind of outside the box, things that are other schools who are practicing a rotate and drop that they're doing that might be of benefit to Ridge High School, to our staff, and to our students. So all in all, I look forward to coming back in a couple of months with some more firm recommendations for all of these things. But it is a really exciting time. And you know, the teachers are really anxious to kind of dive in and get going and to kind of figure out what this is going to look like. And I'm excited to kind of be along for the ride.
Thanks, Ms. Howarth. And our third focus group, because it's such a big piece of the rotate and drop, is being led by Mr. Graber. And that group is focused on the idea of lunch, but more of the opportunity that unit lunch provides us. Mr. Graber.
Thank you, Dr. Lazovic. So when Dr. Lazovic had initially approached me about taking on the lunch piece, I will admit it sounded a little overwhelming, but I'm excited, enthusiastic to be able to give you a little bit of insight as to what our subcommittee's been working on. I'm working with a committee of about 8 individuals, administrators, counselors, and teachers who during a very challenging year have been quite enthusiastic and dedicated to lot of problem solving, brainstorming, and just trying to do what's best for our students. And I think it definitely, the name of the period definitely fits when we say opportunity, because I think the unit lunch will provide a lot of opportunities that weren't otherwise there. The good news is we do plan to feed them during this time. And you can see that we have, well, there'll be 4 levels of food service that will be implemented. Hot and cold, very much like they're accustomed to in our current cafeteria. But we'll be adding pre-made and pickup stations. Students will have access to order ahead apps, where they very much like what they're accustomed to at Starbucks and Dunkin', being able to call in their orders ahead of time and then picking them up by name. And we're also going to enhance our current vending machine offerings. So there'll be 4 different tiers that students will be able to choose from. And, you know, from day to day, what their needs are may change depending on whether they have that lab or an open period. So they can kind of monitor and adjust to how they choose to eat based on what their demands are and what offerings are in the part of the building that they may be in on that given day. Dr. Lazovic talked about the A and B sessions to the lunch. So basically the lunch will be split into approximately 2 30-minute sessions for a total of a 60-minute period. As I said, we have a subcommittee that's planning for these exciting times ahead. And one of the things that we immediately came to as a great advantage is one of the biggest complaints, my own children included, they always talk about how certain friends aren't in their lunch periods because you're splitting the student body into 5 lunch periods. With this new model, students will be able to eat with whoever they want because they'll all have lunch available at least a few of those 4 days in the rotation to get together with their friend. As we said, it provides options that students didn't previously have. It might provide opportunities for them to meet with teachers that otherwise wouldn't be available during their lunch, meeting up with friends, possibly joining clubs, music lessons, things of that sort. And eventually we plan, right now we're discussing with the adults, but later on as we progress, we want to also get student feedback and input as to how the second session, it's, as we said, it's an A and a B. So obviously half of that will be used to eat, but the other half has some flexibility. So we want to hear from the students on that. So how do we get there, and what is our committee doing specifically? At this point, now that we know what the food service and distribution is going to look like, we're starting to hone in on areas of congregation for students, because obviously not all 1,800 of them are going to fit in the cafeteria, so we have to get creative there. We're going to plan a rollout for students and staff because it's going to be new to everyone. So we want to make sure that we provide them with as much information as possible prior to the first day and including the first day so that it can be successful. We're starting to assess needs in terms of furniture. Obviously, we're going to need additional trash and recycling receptacles. We talked about possibly some type of folding countertops that could be fastened to walls, all kinds of different creative ideas to maximize our space. Obviously, with that many children eating at once and throughout the building, we're going to need to get creative in our supervision during lunch periods. And we've started to talk about some options for the other session of lunch. I have to say that's probably been one of the most exciting parts. I've had to kind of rein the teachers and administrators back in because everybody has 100 ideas how we might utilize that. So I can only imagine once we open it up to the students, we'll probably only get more ideas. And we're also, as I said, working with Aramark and central office to determine the areas of where that food distribution will occur in the building. So that's a quick overview. Obviously, as we get into more specific determinations and recommendations, we'll be once again doing another presentation to get more into the specifics later on this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Graber. A lot going on in that opportunity period. Our last focus group within our leadership team is that focused on wellness. And this year, what evolved out of the focus on wellness, given the pandemic and the immediate shift in, scheduling and the reality of our day-to-day cohorting and the rest due to safety precautions that were absolutely necessary, what evolved was this idea of advisory period. And what we're trying to do is engage in conversations beyond the curriculum that are important to us as people and as a rich community. We have learned an incredible amount about where we currently are in our ability to have these conversations, encouraging students to talk about themselves and their thinking, and just building those skills so they can be out in the world after us and be successful, functioning, happy adults. So we've learned a great deal. As we've taken that learning, reflected on that, gotten feedback from students and from staff, we have a team of teachers, thank you, members of the Board of Education, for supporting this, who have gotten together and are planning out what this wellness program would look like moving forward. It would no longer be advisory, but how do we approach the needs of freshmen versus sophomores versus juniors versus seniors versus the collective when it comes to Ridge. And so they have been working on how we can impact the overall environment, how we improve communication, not just amongst staff and staff to student, but student to student and school to family. And then there's this idea behind rotate and drop is that it structures time differently. So how do we maximize that new structure to create a safer environment, a more healthy environment, a less stressful environment, and ultimately a more successful environment for the students? And so that last focus group is working on this specific area, putting together recommendations, not just for next year, but they're actually putting together a 5-year plan that will evolve as rotate and drop does. So a number of questions have come up from students, from staff, from families, sometimes from us, with everything going on. As an example, the success that was today, thanks to our staff, central office, Board of Education, transportation, and the snow for making it that much more interesting. But everyone's been asking, well, why would we do this now? And really, there are a number of reasons. The first simple one is that if you look at our current schedule, the schedule that our students are used to, even those coming in 4 days a week now, we are closer to the reality of rotate and drop than we've ever been. We've actually taken significant steps toward this schedule. So for us to go back to a 9-period day for a year, to then go forward to what we know is a better schedule, which is that rotate and drop, really doesn't make sense for our staff or our students when we've already taken steps toward it. The next piece is this idea that come September, realistically speaking, our current sophomores who will be juniors haven't had a 9-period day for over a year. Our current freshmen have never had a 9-period day here at Ridge High School. And next year's freshmen coming from the 8th grade have never been to Ridge High School. So you have more than half of the school that does not know what our previous 9-period day looked like. So they are primed to, again, move forward to this idea of rotate and drop. However, I think the single biggest reason why now is that when we visit these other schools, when we investigate what we want to do with rotate and drop, when we talk to students, when we talk to staff and can have those few moments of ability to focus on what this will be, it dramatically impacts the wellness of the entire community if we do this the right way. And really, there's simply no time to waste in doing that. And that's the biggest reason as to why now. The other piece that comes up is there's the pandemic and the unknown that comes with it. What will next year look like? We're all hoping for the best. I mean, even after today, it was exciting, but I think we all truly hope for a full return of all of our students to school the way we know Ridge to be in the past, and we know Ridge will again be in the future, but we don't know the timeline. We don't know what the pandemic will bring. Long and short of it, why now? And as far as that is concerned, is that if you look at the school district, the high schools, even in our county, that are running a rotate and drop and are running off of an 8-period selection, they were more easily able to transition into different cohorting models because they were working off of 8 classes in 8 periods. Because we were working off of 8 classes in 9 periods, it created a number of challenges, which I believe we were able to overcome. That said, though, it would be much easier come September, were we forced to transition into a pandemic-guided schedule of some kind, to already be in this rotate and drop for the benefit of the students and the staff, academically speaking. So how do we get there? A lot of information today. You heard about the preparation, our leadership team, our faculty and staff. We're devoting most of our faculty meetings as well as some of our department meetings between now and June to allow the instructional work that you heard Ms. Fox talk about, but as well visiting virtually with other teachers from other schools who are in this and talking about what we can do in an instructional block and the realities of the rotation as we go through it. We're also bringing in, and thanks to Mr. Mclaughlin, Mr. Markarian, they've brought in a number of our contractors and consultants as we've been looking at the facility and how we update the facility to be prepared to do this across the entire campus. And again, a number of things will happen for next year, but we have ideas that I think will carry us beyond just next year into the forthcoming second and third years of rotate and drop. There's a huge amount of training. That professional development, we focus on staff, trying to make sure that now through the summer and even into September and beyond, we constantly focus on how we're doing, what our goals are, what tools are new, what tools are created, and how we can most effectively reap all the benefits that rotate and drop bring to us. That said, communication will be huge. So if you're a student for next year, if you're a family member, parent, guardian, thinking about, wow, he talks very quickly. A lot of people just threw a lot of information at me. How am I supposed to be ready for September? Our communications plan is being chunked into months, as I said. So we're going to reshare this presentation, but then we're going to focus little by little, bit by bit, on smaller aspects of rotate and drop and having smaller conversations on those so that they're easier to digest for us to take in and kind of think through. And as we put all the different pieces one at a time into the whole puzzle, we'll be prepared for September. As I mentioned, we planned on some question and answer, and we will be launching our rotate and drop website, which will be your single one-stop shopping for everything rotate and drop as we prepare for September. Working with Ms. Smith and Ms. Juiceabout and some of our faculty and staff talking already about what our orientation looks like, how that will be adjusted to make sure our incoming freshmen are prepared for rotate and drop and for Ridge, but also how we leverage the beginning, Ms. Howarth mentioned before, how we open school differently, knowing that in many ways, all of our students are freshmen as we move to rotate and drop together. So how do we set up the beginning of September differently to build some excitement, welcome everyone back, and set them up for success and understanding when it comes to the workings of the schedule? And so all those things are planned as we're moving towards September. And that last bullet there is just, please check your Friday folder messages as we consistently try and, as I mentioned, drop one puzzle piece at a time and share that information. But we are committed to making continual updates, sharing reminders, and having ongoing check-ins, certainly with our staff, but then as well with the students and with our families. And so that said, that is our opening presentation as we kind of kick off our work, our journey to September. Mr. Markarian.
Thank you, Dr. Lazovic, et al. Excellent information. We appreciate everything that you put into that. And perhaps our board president might like to solicit any questions from board members for our team.
I'd be happy to, but I cannot resist the opportunity to say, oh my gosh, this is amazing. As one of the people who has been following this for the entirety of the 10 years, I'm so excited with what you brought to us tonight. And I know it's just the beginning, but thank you all for that wonderful presentation and for the, peek into the future and the possibilities that it brings. And I particularly love that opportunity period. That's just awesome. With that, board members, any questions? I see Ms. Beckman's hand.
I'm really excited too. This looks great. And I wasn't sure how you were going to handle the tech people who go, but having the AM and the PM schedules with the drop, a drop in the morning and a drop in the afternoon, that's fantastic. I was just wondering if you're going to do any changes to the start time with this as well.
Mark, you want me to jump in?
Yeah, you can jump in. I mean, we talked about this a little bit, but go for it, and I'll support any other thoughts. Go ahead.
My understanding is that much like, and again, our focus is wellness, and much like the rotate and drop, which is an operational piece, the start times, Ms. Beckman, have also been discussed. As of right now, they are two different pieces, and we have not focused much right now on start time. Our energies have been directed to the rotate and drop, but obviously, I know those conversations had been going on. I have not been privy to them here yet, but I know that, having been part of those conversations elsewhere, they're very much about wellness. So I understand why you would ask.
Okay. All right. I love it though. Thank you.
I saw Ms. Richmond's hand.
I just wanted to say too, what a great presentation. I have been lucky to have sat on a lot of different discussions and conversations getting this to where it is today. I'm so excited that you are all excited. Teachers have told me personally, that they're so excited to see that this come to fruition too. And I think I know that there will be some apprehension in the beginning, because change always brings some anxiety and nervousness. But I think once people get a taste of it, they're going to be so happy and excited. And I'm secretly very sad for my own kids who missed out on this, because this has been such a long time coming. But I'm so happy that we're finally at the place we are. And you guys all did an excellent job with the presentation. I love the communication plan and chunking it for people, because I do think that there are going to be a lot of students and parents who don't understand the schedule in the beginning, and it's going to take a lot of learning there. But it sounds great what you plan to do. So thank you for all of the hard work to the administrators, the teachers, the students who have participated in different aspects of it as well. Everybody, just great job.
I see Ms. McHugh's hand.
Yeah, I'd like to just echo what a couple other board members already said about being so excited about this. We've been talking about this for, like, as I think Kristen said, 10 years, I think. So I'm excited for my kids that'll actually get to experience this. But I was reminiscing with some of the kids who went on the original visits to the schools to look at the rotating drop. And these kids are now in their mid-20s, and they were so excited to hear that it's actually happening. But when you're talking about the teachers on these committees and how excited they are, I'm sure some of them are the same teachers that I remember going on those visits with at that point, and they were excited about it then. And I'm sure they're very happy that we're getting to finally do this.
And Ms. White? Yes.
I just want to say there's so many times that, we hear from parents, you're always telling us all the reasons you can't do something. And what I love is that you told us all the reasons tonight that we can do something. And I think the reason that you're not getting questions is because your presentation touched on every one of the questions that we have been asking for the past few years. And I'm so excited. I have a current Ridge student, but I have an incoming 9th grader, and I am thrilled that he's going to have 4 years of this.
Anyone else? I just want to echo what Jen just said, because I think that really does hit the nail on the head. There's not a lot of questions here because that was so comprehensive. And I know that you have lots more to share over the coming months. But in terms of what we've all been experiencing over the years that this has been investigated, it just feels like such great energy bringing it forward right now. And it's nice to have that feeling about anything in the middle of a pandemic. So again, thank you all so very much. So unless there's any other comments or questions from board members, I think we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is our superintendent's report. Mr. Markarian.
Sure. So Dr. Lazovic, I think you are done sharing. So we're good there. I think there's just one item, and then I would share my notes for everyone separately. We want to get a motion on the one item.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, oh, I see hands already. Mr. Salmon and Ms. Schaefer and Mr. Mclaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Beckman?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. And back to Mr. Markarian.
Thank you. So I'm just going to share screen here with some notes about some other items that I just wanted to go over in light of the fact that we had a big day today. I wanted to share some information related to that. Okay, hopefully you're seeing the big purple superintendent's report slide there. Great. Okay, so, today was a great day for us. We were able to make a transition that we've been talking about for quite some time, trying to figure out how to step forward in our efforts to have more students come back to school in person for a greater amount of time. I just wanted to share this little pictograph here with you relative to our current CALI score in the Central West, which we've talked about having been positive for a couple weeks now. But I just thought it was great that today in my email, I found this report that Somerset County in and of itself is now also in the moderate CALI score, which was just really encouraging, given that today was the first day that we brought a significant number of students into the building as an increase compared to what was coming to school prior to today. So this was great news. It was really encouraging, and it was just a nice way to start our day. So how did it go today? We had a meeting this morning. The principals were able to just share briefly how things were going in terms of the opening of school, that sort of feeling of a first day, if you will. That energy and excitement was something that all the principals reported universally, so that was really awesome. There were a couple of things that obviously we expected in terms of challenges that we knew that we would be dealing with, and obviously having more students in the buildings and having to manage that social distance with increased energy. And of course, we had, as Dr. Lazovic pointed out, just a little bit more of the white stuff today. So we saw a significant amount more traffic, not only at arrival, but also pickup today. So we'll have to adjust to that. But I did want to share with you, with respect to that social distance issue, that each of the schools, they have their own unique configurations, their own unique layouts, the number of classrooms that are running, the amount of space within each classroom, the number of students assigned to different classrooms. So everyone is working very hard to keep social distance in the front of their minds as they work with the increased number of students in the building. And I just want to reassure everybody that we're doing the best that we can with this in terms of maximizing the use of the space in each of the buildings. But we recognize that there are times where we're going to be less than 6 feet in some situations, in some classrooms, students passing one another in the hallways, obviously. And we know this is something that we have to monitor closely. We did supply all the schools with a host of desk shields that they could put to use to help mitigate situations where social distance wasn't as much as they would like to see it. And we did purchase KN95 masks for the staff as well. So, we're working hard at keeping things safe while we do invite more students into the schools. I wanted to share with you, a lot of folks have asked, when the dust has settled in terms of all of the selection forms and tallying up the results, how did it all shake out as we went through all the details of those selection forms and all of the information that we had in our database, our student information system, and how did it break out? So as a district, we're at about 54% in-person selection for the program, with the balance being in the virtual program at 46%. I share with you each of the breakdowns for our schools. Ridge is at 47% in person, and 52% in person. Cedar Hill, 61% in person. Mount Prospect, 47% in person. Oak Street, 79% in person, and Liberty Corner School, 65% in person. I just rounded those off to the nearest whole percent, and hopefully, if I did that right, each pair of numbers adds up to 100. Okay, so in that breakdown of students that we expected in school for in-person instruction, we knew that we had the possibility that students may or may not come, but I think that as a whole, we built it and they came. The students did come in good numbers. Obviously, Ridge High School today, the first day, was at about 81%, but that is a significant increase in terms of the daily attendance that we were seeing, which was probably somewhere in 65 to 70% range. So having 81% of the students that were scheduled to be in person actually come was great to see. And as we heard from Juliet today, hopefully that positive energy is contagious and students will start taking advantage of their in-person schedule and come with an even greater percentage of attendance. The rest of the schools were all in the 90s. Annan had about 94% of their expected students come, Cedar Hill 97%, Liberty Corner 93%, Oak Street 91%, and Mount Prospect at 98%. So I asked Mr. Syed if he wouldn't mind jumping in and let us know how it's been going, because we're interested in not only trying to bring as many of our students back into the building, but also as many of our staff. So Mr. Syed, I know, was going to jump in here on this slide for me.
Thank you, Mr. Marcari. And to that point, we are talking with staff to bring them back on site. As we've mentioned over the last few months, we do have some staff who were approved for remote assignments who are now being asked to return to their buildings. And so that is going to be closely aligned with today's date. So one of the things that we've been doing over the last couple of weeks and will continue to do over the next week or so is to meet with these staff members and to set a date for a return. Those dates are going to vary a little bit based on individual situations, but we will be bringing back almost all of the staff who were remote at the 6 to 12 level over the next few weeks. And then all of the staff that we need to bring back K-5. Obviously, we have K-5 staff that we need to be virtual because they're in all virtual classes. But the key there is trying to return students to their classrooms with their teachers. And that's one of the things I know that Dr. Lazovic has been working on at Ridge in particular. And again, not just having a teacher there, but also being in a more familiar area like a classroom. So we'll be doing that over the next few weeks. So again, something very, very positive we're happy to report today regarding staffing. Mr. Markarian.
Thank you, Mr. Syed. So all in all, I just really want to express a lot of gratitude. We had many, many, many hours of effort put into sort of a big pivot in the middle of the school year, trying to shift from the cohorting schedule with the two groups, A and B, being eliminated and bringing all the in-person students back in together. I know that was a lot of work from the administrative team and the teachers in preparing their classrooms and getting ready to have more students in the buildings. We appreciate the support of our board as well in helping us get to this point. And I really don't want to forget the fact that, today we had one day, right? So we're really, really excited we had a day. It was a good day and it had a lot of positive energy, but we can't forget that we are still in a pandemic. We're really thrilled that numbers seem to be getting better. We're thrilled that, Somerset County is yellow and our region of the state is yellow, but we're also very sensitive to the fact that it really is a cooperative effort to try to work together to stay healthy. Our nursing team, our nursing coordinator, they're all working really hard, communicating with families, trying to provide good guidance for everyone. And of course, all of us, continuing to try to, make good decisions about the situations we put ourselves in and minimize contributions to spread. So it's been a great community effort, a great effort amongst the staff, the students, and the nursing team to really try to stay healthy. And we almost have to double down on our efforts a little bit, despite the fact that our data is getting better. The last thing we want to do is take a step backward, and we hope that that's not going to happen. But we have to work hard to keep this going. And so we certainly appreciate the support of families in this, because we know that all of that due diligence and doing daily screening forms and really staying on top of the different social situations, it's really difficult, and we understand how hard that is for everybody, but we greatly appreciate it because it's that kind of support that helps us to stay healthy and keep things moving in the right direction. So I just wanted to congratulate everyone. I'm glad to see that the administrative team that presented tonight was able to stay on for a couple minutes longer, because I really wanted you guys to know how much I appreciate all the work that you did, not just with this presentation tonight, but it's humbling. I know how hard you guys are working. you know, you're doing everything that we wanted to try to do with that master schedule at Ridge, and at the same time juggling this pandemic and building a new schedule for your kids to come back without cohorts. And that is just a tremendous amount of work. I can't thank you guys enough. I really appreciate your presentation tonight. And I just want you to know that I see it in your yawns. I know how hard it is, and you guys are doing a tremendous job. So thank you so much for everything you're putting into it. And that really goes out to, you know, all of our teachers and administrators as well, but in particular, taking on the planning for that shift in the master schedule with the lofty and important goals that you outlined. You know, it can't be appreciated enough. So thanks for your presentation tonight. I hope some of you might be checking out to get some sleep, but thanks for everything you did tonight in the presentation. So just to share a couple other things I wanted to point out, we really have worked hard to rebuild our schedules to try to encourage students to be in school and to move towards our ultimate goal, of course, which is bringing back all of our students on a daily basis. And as part of that effort, we are making an adjustment to the student attendance expectation starting next week on Monday, March 1st. When students are absent, we're no longer going to provide the option for virtual for a day when reporting a student absence. So there will be a change. It will be communicated this week, but parents should look for that communication coming from principals this week and recognize a different absence reporting form happening in Genesis starting on Monday, so that for our students that are scheduled to be in person, we're really looking for the students to come to school and be in person. And so if they're not in person, they will be marked absent, and they won't be able to earn credit by working from home as a virtual for the day situation. They need to be in school to earn credit for the day. So, you know, this is an important effort, I think, to reinforce all the hard work that's gone into building schedules and making classes available for the students that want to come to school in person. And we really think it's going to help build the momentum to try to get all of our kids coming back to school. And as long as we can stay healthy, we think this is going to be the right direction to go. One other thing I wanted to mention with respect to our shift is that we have been implementing more technology. You may recall we bought another wave, if you will, of Chromebooks to help the district manage some of the challenges that it's facing this year. And this is the current dynamic going on with technology, with devices that students are using. At the kindergarten through fourth grade grade range, the students will have Chromebooks supplied to them in their classroom. Our grade 5 students, some of them will need to bring their district-owned Chromebooks back and forth to school daily. So we will have Chromebooks, but those students who have been issued a district-owned Chromebook in the 5th grade, we're asking those students to bring them back and forth to school daily. This is similar to what's going on in the grade levels from 6 to 12, where students are bringing their own device, or if they have been issued a district-owned Chromebook, they're bringing that device back and forth. And a pitch from our director of technology, Alex Blinder, was the plea to remember to charge your device at night before you go to bed, and try to wake up in the morning with a fully charged device when you come to school. Just helps a lot. Something else that came up recently was Executive Order 220. I know that Mr. Shello is working directly with the coaches to make sure parents are informed, but basically this order allowed parents to start attending athletic events up to 2 parents or guardians per athlete. The way we're approaching this is basically associated with the venue that the athletic event is occurring at. In some cases, we may be having an event that is not on our school grounds, and we have to comply with what the operator is doing. That could be the host district at another district, or it could be a private institution like a hockey rink or a pool. We have to respect the operator's wishes here. But we are certainly working hard to try to make attendance for our parents and guardians to see their kids in these athletic events. I know that I was very passionate about that when my kids were playing sports in school, and certainly we want to make that available to all of our families. We know how important that is. And so to the greatest extent possible, we are going to be doing that depending on the availability of space in the different locations that the kids are having their events. And that's why it could be a little bit different from one thing to the next. So Mr. Shello is communicating with coaches so coaches can let the parents and guardians know what's going on with each event. Finally, I wanted to mention that there was a fairly significant presentation given by our governor. He's, as you well know, giving daily addresses. And in the message that he provided on February 19th, last Friday, there were a couple of significant things that we are following up on to make sure that we are on top of our opportunities to pursue grant resources. He announced $75 million in grants for instruction-related issues, $30 million in grants for mental health supports for students and staff. So we're working on making sure we follow up on those, find the guidance documents necessary to understand exactly how that money is being awarded and what we may be eligible for. So we're working on that. Also, he announced that New Jersey was applying to the federal government for a waiver of statewide and statewide standardized testing, as well as the accountability requirements associated with that standardized testing. So interestingly, I had just worked last week with the board on the agenda for tonight, putting in a resolution that they asked me to include under board forum. And the governor got out a couple days before our agenda was finished, actually. So in any event, that item is actually still on our agenda for tonight. I think the board wants to show support of that waiver application, even though it sounds like the state is definitely applying for it. So you'll see that in board forum. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. With that, we are up to public comment on agenda items. Mr. Syed, do we have anything?
We do, yes. On agenda items, we've got a couple here. Okay, so the first one is from Nicole Saida at 35 Tall Timber Lane. Dear Mr. Markarian and members of the board, thank you for taking a step in the right direction by giving our children more in-school learning. While I'm very appreciative, we need a plan in place to bring all children back full time. Do you have a plan, and when do you see it being implemented? Also, when will you remove the virtual day, Wednesday, from the WAMS and RID schedule? Thank you. And those are all the comments on agenda items. I have other comments, but they're on non-agenda items.
Okay. I don't know if you want to address the one public comment, Mr. Markarian. Before you do, I would just like to say from a board perspective, respectfully to the questioner, because I understand the question and board members have asked about the Wednesdays and other things. It was the first day of return to both the combined cohorts. And I think we have to make sure that that's working before we take the next steps. And certainly that doesn't mean there isn't a plan, but I think we just have to let this play out and see how we do health-wise. Just my 2 cents worth.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I was going to say something similar with regard to that question, and I also just wanted to make sure I don't see anybody in the waiting room, so I think we're probably okay on that front. I just wanted to remind you and make sure we double check on that in terms of video public comments. But I think we're okay. I don't see anybody in there right now. But yeah, I mean, look, we just took a big step today. I think we want to take some time and see how things play out. Obviously, we want to keep things moving forward in a positive direction. The plan by the end of the school year, the plan is to try to get all the kids back for a full day that want to be here in person. You know, we've got them coming right now for, 4.5 hours at Ridge and Annan, and 4 hours and 15 minutes at the elementary schools. So for us to take the next step, we want to look back on some healthy history for a while and know that we're in good shape. Talk to our local health department before we take any more steps forward, and make sure that the conditions look good to try that. In the meantime, we are talking with our food service provider. We actually have a meeting with them this week to start talking about scaling back up. March 1st, as we've talked about in the past, we are bringing back some of our students in some of our self-contained programs on a full day basis. So we're starting to work on scaling that up, and whatever we scale up in terms of food service for those students, we want to be able to increase that so that when the time is right, we have food service available for the remaining students that hopefully start coming to school in person for the full day. And obviously, we want to see that happen before the end of the school year, and that should set us up well for September, feeling as though we're in good shape to have all of our students come back in the fall.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Our next agenda item is the approval of minutes. Could I have a motion, please? Mr. Salmon and Ms. Beckman and Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. Okay, with that, we are up to our next item, which is the Finance Committee report. Mr. Salmon?
Finance met on February 18th. The first item for discussion was a conversation about the error mark and athletics communication procedures for snow removal from the track. Mr. McLaughlin reviewed the procedure for removing snow from the track that's been in place since 2017 and discussed the process that he had put in place involving communications between the Director of Athletics, Director of Facilities, and the Director of Aramark to deploy the tarp and or the snow removal equipment, in addition to developing a plan for having the athletes shovel the track if we cannot get out there to do the snow removal ourselves. The next item was an update on the Ridge High School sanitary lines project. Mr. Perrin, who is the Assistant Director of Facilities, is working with Tony Katana from Spiesel Architects, who's the district architect, to give a punch list to the contractor. The biggest outstanding item on the punch list is to restore the lawn areas that are adjacent to the alleyway behind the new gym, and this will be addressed in the spring. The next item was Mr. Perrin providing an update on the Oak Street School gutter replacement and repair project. Mr. Perrin met with Tremco, an approved roofing contractor through the Middlesex Regional Educational Services Commission, and WeatherTight Systems, a local roofing contractor that is subcontracted by Tremco, to review the Oak Street leaking gutters. WeatherTight has previously worked in the district before and gave a budget to Mr. Perrin to implement the interim fix designed by Spiesel. Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Perrin are going to review the proposal with our district architect and go back to WeatherTight. The next item was an update on busing for March 1st. On March 1st, self-contained students will be coming to school for 5 full days. However, there will be a subgroup of special education students that will still be on an abbreviated day schedule. So if we were to continue to use the same busing regimen, buses would need to take the subgroup of students on the abbreviated schedule home and then wait 2 hours before going back and getting the full day students and bringing them home. So Mr. McLaughlin is working with Ms. O'Connell and Mr. Markarian to determine which of these subgroup of special education students that on the abbreviated day requires transportation home. And for any students requiring transportation, Ms. O'Connell will speak with parents before any decisions are made. The next item was an update on the Ridge High School food service for fall 2021. This was touched on in the presentation given by the administration, by Dr. Vlazovic and the remainder of staff from Ridge High School. Aramark says that with some additional equipment, it can produce and serve enough meals to accommodate the Ridge High School unit lunch. A working group of administrators, consultants, architects, and Dr. Lazovic identified the atrium, which is the area adjacent to the long stairwell near the library at Ridge High School, as a location to deploy movable service and sales stations. Members of the working group are having meetings with the fire marshal and with the local Bernard Township code official to walk through those plans and lay out for to get approval to serve food in that area. The next item was a update from Mr. Mclaughlin on the proposed 2021-2022 budget. Mr. Mclaughlin reviewed the projected budget and reviewed the main drivers of expenses for the district, which are contractual salary increases, increased cost of health benefits, coupled with a loss in employee contribution from new state health plans and labor unionization. The full budget proposal will be coming out, I believe, in May. As for the items that are on the agenda tonight, 1 through 3 are standing items, 4 through 6 are student services, 7 and 8 are approvals of grants from the Italian Language Center to purchase educational materials and reimburse Italian AP exam fees. 9 is approval of a grant application submission to the Italian Language Center for educational materials. 10 is an approval of agreements for non-public services that we retain Somerset County Ed Services for, because we have to pass through money to non-public schools in our districts, for example, St. James. 11 is professional development, and 12 is the approval of the utilization of the alternate revenue projection for the special education Medicaid initiative for the 2021-2022 budget to reflect actual health-related services provided and positive parental consents from one Medicaid eligible special budget to fiscal year 2021-22 alternative revenue. That's it.
Any questions for Mr. Salmon?
I think if Mr. Mclaughlin could just give us a little color on number 12, since I don't know if I read that exactly correctly.
Certainly. The SEMI program is a requirement that the state imposes upon the district. They make a calculation of how many students they believe we have that are below a certain income level and also eligible for related services, meaning that they're both special needs or classified students really receiving a specific types of services, like a related service, which would be a speech and occupational therapy or a physical therapy. And these are billable back by the state to the federal government. And so the driver here really was, and this was an initiative on the part of the state as a result of an Office of the State Comptroller audit of the state about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, is to collect more revenue for the state. We get about 30 cents on every dollar that the state collects for this. The problem with it for the District of Bernards has always been that their calculations are not predicated upon the real number of students that we actually have receiving related services. So we have first a very small, because of our demographics, number of students that are economically eligible. You have to be essentially what the equivalent of a student that would be eligible for free and reduced. Then as a subset of that, you need to be a classified student, and then a subset of that, a classified student receiving related services. And so what we found after the first, I think it was 2 years of this, was that consistently their estimates were much higher. And we went back to them and said, look, these are the actual number of students that we have that are eligible that meet these criteria. We need to revisit and revise that. And so the process to do that is what's before you in this resolution. We request a waiver, we work with the state, we say this is what we actually have in terms of students that meet those criteria for eligible reimbursement by the State Education Medicare Initiative. and the state says, fine, you need to give us a certified resolution of your board requesting that. That's the process. That's why we do it. The state requires us to budget whatever number you see in that resolution as the waiver amount in our budget as an anticipated revenue offset to our budget. Any questions?
Thanks, Rod.
Sure. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. I neglected to ask for a motion at the beginning before Mr. Salmon gave his report. So could we have a motion, please, and a second? Mrs. McCune and Mrs. Richmond. And Mr. McLaughlin, could we please have a roll call?
Ms. Beckman?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. So we are up to our Personnel Committee report. Mrs. McCune? I guess I should first ask for a motion, please. I keep doing that. Mr. Salmon and Ms. Richmond, sorry. Okay, and go ahead, Mrs. McCune. Thank you.
The Personnel Committee met on February 19th. We talked about a number of different personnel items and requests. We also spent some time working on discussions about negotiations with the BTAA, the Administrators Association. The only item that I really have to report out anything about was we did, as a kind of precursor to a discussion that will be happening at the Curriculum Committee, we talked about K-5 specials because there's been questions, from members of the public and from the board as far as how the elementary schedule works and also how it's changing now that the kids are back in school more days. And as we discussed at personnel, it's complicated because the students were getting a lot of their specials via Zoom, whether they're at school or at home. The teachers are all scheduled for full-time, assignments, some in the afternoon and some in the morning. As we start looking at, as the students are in the building on all their mornings, the in-person students, that changes a lot of people's schedules, whether it's support services the students are getting, or Quest, or music lessons and things like that, that were potentially scheduled virtually. Now they might be in person. So the elementary schools are doing a lot of juggling with their schedules. So we looked at the staffing and how that might be impacted. And then also Ms. Fox and Mr. Fackelman talked about how at the Curriculum Committee, we will start talking about the potential to transition to in-person specials as the kids are in the building more. Obviously wanting to get kids back first and see how things are going. And within safety precautions, some specials are more amenable to it than others. For example, PE has already been doing in-person outdoors the whole time when the kids are in the building when they can. So anyway, we're going to get more information about that at the Curriculum Committee whenever it is meeting. And that was the only thing I had to report out publicly.
Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. McCune? Okay, seeing none. Mr. McLaughlin, if we can have a roll call, please.
Ms. Beckman?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer? Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Ms. Hira?
Yes.
Mrs. McCune?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Madam President?
Thank you. With that, we're up to the Policy Committee report, and Mrs. White has kindly agreed to share that report because Mrs. Korn is unable to be with us this evening. So I'm going to ask for a motion first on the two items that we have. Ms. Schaefer and Ms. Beckman. And then Mrs. White, if you'd like to share the report.
Okay. So the committee discussed the alerts that were sent out by Stress Esme in regards to their policy updates. These updates are being incorporated into Berners Township policies, and they will be addressed at the March 8th Policy Committee meeting. Next, we discussed the return to instruction, which Mr. Markarian has talked about a little bit. The updated return to instruction has been submitted already to Roger Jenks. And then there are policies related to the return to instruction. I'm not sure, does Mr. Markarian, do you want to address any of that?
Absolutely. Yep. So there's basically appendices associated with the policy that's actually designated the Restart and Recovery Plan policy. And in that document are appendices that are linked to the policy. And as we change those appendices, we need to present them to the board as part of a policy document and approve them. So as an example, we have a daily screening questionnaire for staff. That's part of one of the required appendix documents for the Restart and Recovery Plan. And it's very similar to the daily screening form that students complete or their parents complete for them on a daily basis. And one of the items that is in that appendix document for the daily screening form for both staff and students actually is the issue of travel. And we have, since the inception of the screening forms, we have had a question that addresses the subject of travel. And it requires that when we learn of folks that are traveling, depending on the nature of their travel and the location of their travel, there have been many times where folks have had to quarantine and not participate in school for a period of time. So we are proposing in this amendment to the appendice documents for the screening forms for both staff and students that what we do going forward is emphasize a message that we're asking people to travel responsibly, whether they travel across the street, across town, across the state, whether they're traveling within the town, the state, or they're going to Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Delaware, or anywhere else, to just travel responsibly and make good decisions about travel. And in the process of doing so, certainly we are providing to everyone the guidance documents that the state of New Jersey has published for travel in the US, as well as the guidance document for travel abroad published by the CDC. And what we're proposing here is that when we become aware of travel or folks ask us about traveling, whether it be a staff member or a parent traveling with their children, that we refer them to these guidance documents and encourage them to advise themselves of the contents of these documents and make good decisions. So what we're suggesting is that effective March 1st, the school district will no longer be requiring staff or students to quarantine as a result of travel, right? Instead, we're simply asking that people consider their travel and their exposure risks and make a decision as to what is most appropriate to do. And our school nurses are more than happy to talk to staff and or families about what the guidance documents say, why they guide people in certain directions, and what might be important to consider if you are traveling in the US or otherwise, and what are your exposure risks. But rather than try to say to everyone, you must quarantine as a result of travel, we're simply going to give people reasonable counsel. And as long as they are healthy, when they return from travel, they would not be expected to quarantine. Staff would not be expected to quarantine. They'd be expected to return to work. Students would not be expected to quarantine. They'd be expected to go back to class if they're an in-person student, assuming, of course, that they satisfy the other requirements of the daily screening form, which is essentially that they're healthy and they're not feeling sick when they report to school or when they report to work. We had a lot of conversation about this issue around the concept with my nursing coordinator and other administrators in the district, talking about the fact that, you know, there's a certain reality to saying that travel in New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Delaware is not questioned in our New Jersey travel guidance documents, but traveling somewhere else like Maryland is suddenly a problem. So, you know, in terms of trying to make sense of all of this, we really feel like only individuals know whether or not they're putting themselves in situations where they may or may not have an increased exposure to COVID and therefore potentially be contributing to community spread by putting themselves in situations where, you know, for example, indoors with a big crowd, something to that effect. You know, that could happen whether you're in town or whether you're out of state. And it really comes down to your personal choices about whether or not you're going to try to avoid situations that might put you and yourself or your family in an exposure situation. So rather than try to piece it out just by the location of travel, just emphasize that message was the idea in this amendment for both travel among students and travel among staff. The other piece that is included in these appendix policies is related not to travel, but to being a close contact. So if someone is identified as a close contact to someone who has tested positive for COVID, not with respect to travel, just in general, you have been exposed to someone who's COVID positive and you've been identified as a close contact. What we're proposing here is an amendment to the length of the quarantine that is required. And the reason that we are eligible for that is because we are now in the yellow designation or the moderate designation on the Cali score. And by virtue of that, according to the DOH documentation, we may reduce our quarantine down from 14 days to 10 days for the quarantine time on a close contact. In addition, we have the option of reducing that 10-day quarantine down to 7 days if someone takes a COVID test, and we are recommending the PCR test, between days 5 and 7. And if that test comes back negative, then they may cut short the quarantine from 10 days to 7 days. So it's really two policy issues. One is on travel, which affects both the daily screening form for staff and the daily screening form for students. And then the second policy issue is related to the length of quarantine for close contacts. And what we have in this amendment is that close contact quarantine is reduced to 10 days and all the way to 7 if somebody wants to get a PCR test and it has a negative result. As you mentioned, the other amendments to this document have already been reviewed by the county superintendent, and they're what we're already doing effective today with the different instructional program and the cohorts being eliminated.
Okay. We also have a second reading, and it has to do with the school calendar. And we discussed this at the previous meeting, but so it's policy 8210. And it states the policy language will be amended to include the following. In the event that Rosh Hashanah occurs during the first week of school, the first day of school will not coincide with the first full day of Rosh Hashanah. The 2021-22 school year will be amended to reflect this change. School will start on Wednesday, September 8th. The extra snow day in May will be removed. And the calendar will be posted to our website following the next meeting. I believe we vote on the calendar at the next meeting. Is that what we discussed?
Yes, yep, I'll put the calendar amendments on for the next meeting.
Okay. And then the next policy meeting, I want to say, is March 8th.
Any questions? Mr. Salmon.
So Nick, for the policy about reducing quarantine for being identified as a close contact, do we have the process in place? Like, are the nurses going to alert either staff or students that they're a close contact and that they should get if they want to invoke the 7-day option, they should get a PCR test between 5 days and 7 days, and that's all set up and the nurses are handling all that?
Yeah, so Rita and I have talked at length about it, and our nursing coordinator, Rita Zarabera, and of course, every day the nurses are involved in contact tracing and identifying close contacts. So if we approve this policy change tonight, allowing for the option for folks to cut their quarantine short by having that negative PCR result, then they'll have to take a little time to make that pivot. It'll take some time as parents communicate potentially an interest in even doing that. At this stage of the game, somebody that's already in the middle of a quarantine, it may not be realistic, depending on the timing of the quarantine that they're already in, to try to get a PCR test that comes back negative to cut the quarantine short. But it might be if someone's in the middle of a quarantine right now and they're on day 2 or 3, and the board approves this change, if they go and get a negative PCR test on days 5, 6, or 7, they could cut that quarantine short. And Rita's aware of the policy being discussed tonight, and of course our nurses would have to manage some pivoting if in fact parents want to try to take advantage of going for a test, going for a PCR test, and if they do have a negative result, then of course the nurses would work with them to adjust their quarantine.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Okay, then I think we're ready for a roll call.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
I'm voting yes on 1 and no on 2.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. Okay, so now we're up to the curriculum committee report.
Curriculum actually is meeting on March 5th, but we do have 2 course change titles that I discussed at the last meeting. Physical Education 9 is going to become Introduction to Sport, and the other Phys Ed 9 is going to become Introduction to Fitness and Wellness.
Okay, so we need a motion. Mr. Salmon and Mrs. Schaefer. And then Mr. McLaughlin, can we please have a roll call on that one?
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes,
Madam President.
thank you. So with that, we're up to the Wellness Committee report. Ms. Schaefer.
Yes, the Wellness Committee met on the 28th of January. I'm sorry it's taken a while to report out, but we first spoke about the counseling program updates. The counselors are currently in the middle of academic planning and scheduling for grades 8 through 11. The community bundle has been published, and detailed information about the scheduling process, course choice options, videos from the departments, and letters of information are available on the front page of the Ridge High School counseling page. Students have all had presentations about this information, and the school counselors and department supervisors held Q&A sessions about classes and answer other questions in February. Students will be scheduled for 15-minute virtual appointments, and they should come to those appointments with some course requests already entered into Genesis, so time can be spent reviewing and discussing any questions. Junior meetings will include preliminary college discussions, so those meetings are for longer periods of time. All course requests need to be entered into Genesis by early April, so the team can work on the master schedule, our new rotating and drop, for next year. The deadline for requests for courses is April 7th. We discussed additional opportunities for identifying students who are in need of extra support. At the February 3rd staff in service, the administration did share protocols for disengaged students, and teachers had time to consider their students who might need extra support. This information will be collected and reviewed by the administration. In addition to the voluntary counseling and mental health needs assessment that was sent out late in October, another follow-up was sent the week of February 15th to students and parents, inviting them to fill out the assessment and self-identify as a student who needs additional counseling or mental health support. Ongoing counseling activities at Ridge High School include freshman check-ins for 15 minutes during the second quarter, seniors meeting with their counselor for a mid-year checkup on their college application status or other future plans, and to update Naviance. Sophomores have been working on a career exploration assessment, and nearly 100% of our students had completed the career interest inventory. Juniors heading into college planning meetings as part of the scheduling process mentioned before. At WAMS, the counselors have been prepping for part 2 of the suicide prevention unit for all grades, which is upcoming. They're working on transition activities, both for the 8th graders who are moving up to 9th at the high school, as well as the 5th graders who will be heading into WAMS in 6th grade. Group counseling and afternoon support groups are continuing. And at the elementary school, the counselors have been, the counselors have been working on their self-management curriculum with students, including lunches, classroom lessons, and whole school assemblies for social emotional learning. A couple of other notes: the week of February 1st was National School Counseling Week, and we send our regards and thanks to our many school counselors, or wizards, as Dr. Lazovic called them earlier. And the county is offering presenters to schools on a variety of topics related to mental health, and Ms. Smith is looking into having some speakers come soon for district families. The next meeting of wellness is this Thursday, February 25th.
Any questions for Ms. Schaefer? No questions. And nothing to vote on that one. So the next item is liaison committee reports. Do we have any? I know Ms. Korn's not here. Mrs. Richmond, there was nothing from SCESC, right? Anything else? Okay, then we are moving on to public comment on non-agenda items. Ms. Fox, do we have anyone in the waiting room?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Syatt, any written comment?
Yes. I'll begin with the first comment, which is from Max Albee, 96 Alder Lane. Board of Ed members and Mr. Markarian, I'm writing in because it seems like there's always something new for us as students to complain about. As tradition at Ridge, boys and girls have worn different colored gowns at graduation, a tradition many of us look forward to and liked at Ridge. This year, a survey was put up for our grade asking if any of us would like to change it to one color so everyone feels included. Not surprisingly, after a few hours, I went back to check the survey results and nobody really wanted to change it. Keeping the tradition the same was winning and had won the survey by a good margin, almost 3-1. Then a few days ago, it was announced on the grade-wide account where the survey was posted that we would be changing to everyone wearing the same color. I'm not sure if this was an official announcement, but it was disheartening to say the least. This is not the first time that our district's administration has failed us as students by taking away things we look forward to. Changing something that many students don't want to change during a year where nothing has gone our way and we already have had to miss out on many opportunities is not fair, and I compel you to continue making changes in the best interest of your students. Next comment is from Mark Matarazzo, 29 Spencer Road. Can someone comment on why snow days have turned into virtual days for in-person students? Both my children are in person, as that is the best learning environment for them. They thrive in an environment with physical peers and teacher. Through their classroom, they see the same successes and struggles that are going through, but are encouraged by the fact that they are not alone in their needs. When in person, the student is also physically right there and can visually see what each student needs for that day and pay better attention to them. For students who are accustomed to in person, that is not something that translates to a virtual environment, where your peers and teacher are little rectangles on the screen and where student focus is diminished. Going virtual was an emergency solution to an emergency situation. For those who do better in the in-person environment, we all worked through the challenges until the day our children could be back in school. They have been back as hybrid and over the last month have returned with cohorts phased out. At no fault of the teacher for in-person students, the quality of the education of the virtual experience is far inferior to the in-person experience. Why, when there's a snow day, are we reverting to a virtual day? Why are we not doing what would have been done in any other year and close schools and add a day to the end of the year? The school calendar has provisions for this. Why, when kids are back in person, cohort or not, are we subjecting the students to anything but the best day of teaching possible? From the experience I see with my kids, the quality of the education on these virtual days does not compare to their in-person days. Again, no fault of the teachers do a great job. It is the fault of the teaching mechanism, school versus screen. Is there a rush to get to 180 days and end the school year early? The in-person environment has already been deemed safe, or we wouldn't be in person, so ending early shouldn't be the case. While these days may count as an official day, it is only because everyone showed up, but not because the quality of the education deems it so. Going virtual was an exception to an emergency situation. It is not normal and will never be so for in-person students. Why are you forcing virtual to become a new normal? What is the thought process here? While we are coming into March, there might not be many snow days left, but I would like to hear some feedback as to why decisions like this are made and why decisions like having an abbreviated virtual day because road conditions are bad are made. These decisions are not in line with your own mission statement and philosophy. These decisions do everything to maximize our children's potential. To quote a bullet point of your philosophy, children learn in different ways. We have a responsibility to help all students maximize their potential. Thank you. The next comment is from Madeline Fedor, 26 Victoria Drive. My name is Madeline Fedor and I'm a sophomore at Ridge. I'm writing to raise a concern for the upcoming in-person gym classes and the increase of students in the gyms. This past year at Ridge, the option to opt out of gym class and receive an extra study hall using option 2 has been restricted, and students are now required to take gym. With the upcoming change in the hybrid schooling schedule, hybrid students will now have to participate in 2 in-person gym classes and 1 online gym class. Now that twice as many students will be in the school, gym class becomes more unsanitary and continues to be an inconvenience to students. Due to this school year struggle with COVID-19, the school's locker rooms are not to be used, therefore restricting students from changing in and out of school clothes. This causes many issues, one of them being the struggle of dressing properly for the weather. Students are forced to choose whether to dress warm for the cold weather or to dress lightly for the activities in an unair-conditioned gymnasium. During gym class, there is also an added pressure to participate to one's fullest extent due to the fact that gym class is graded and has the potential to affect one's academic success. Additionally, on account of the locker rooms being closed, students participating in gym class are forced to work out and then go to their next class in the same sweaty and dirty clothes that they just worked out in. As a hybrid student, I can speak from experience that transitioning from gym to an academic class is especially difficult in in-person school. Trying to focus and succeed in class becomes difficult when sweating under a mask in winter clothes after gym. The gyms at Ridge are typically already warm before activity begins, and the floors of the gym are dirty. Floor work during gym classes forces students to sweat and work out while pressed against the same floor that other students had touched and sweat on the period before. As the number of students increases in the building and gyms, the number of germs on the floor spreading from student to student will also increase. I would like to respectfully request that the locker rooms be open for changing in and out of gym appropriate clothing, or the option for students eligible to opt out of gym to be reinstated. Thank you for taking the time to read my concerns, and I hope you will consider my request. Next public comment is, let's see, is from Adrika Chadaraj at 6 Wharton Way. I hope you're all well. First, I want to take some time to appreciate all the teachers and administrators who have been working hard to make this year as normal as possible. Next, I want to comment on the new policy. Hybrid students can no longer earn credit by choosing to stay virtual for one day. In-person students can be absolutely exhausting for students, and every high schooler should be able to take a day to go to school from the safety of their home. Is there any way that this policy could be overturned? The next public comment is from Brenda Watt, 99 Culberson Road. Thank you for opening up the schools for 4 days of in-person instruction. It's a step in the right direction. I think it's important that you clarify what the instruction format for in-person versus virtual instruction will be like. The culture of the classroom has unfortunately changed drastically as a result of teachers having to balance having both virtual and in-person students. I can understand if you allow some students to continue on a 100% virtual basis. However, I would hope that by September 2021, classes can return to normal instruction as much as possible. I'm hoping that science labs return to normal, hands-on classes that use in-person tools, machinery, supplies can also return to normal pre-pandemic experiences of in-person instruction. Also, we need in-person clubs as well. Our kids have been able to participate in sports in person. However, the warmth of in-person clubs also needs to return without fail in the fall or sooner. Please let us, the parents, know what type of in-person classroom experience our kids will have to look forward to in September before the end of the school year. We parents need time to plan for the next school year. The next public comment is from Chow Shearer at 16 Tall Timber Lane. Thank you for getting the students back to school. My daughter was excited to be back. Regarding the comment that if a student selects in person, they will no longer have the option of being virtual and will be counted absent unless in school. Will the students still be able to join the class virtually, even if they do not get credit for being present? What if a student gets COVID and must quarantine? Would they be out for 2 weeks or would they be allowed to go virtual? Same thing if there's travel, for example, seniors doing college visits, and they're supposed to be quarantined. The next public comment is from Stacy Irvine, 42 Mount Airy Road. Thank you for maintaining virtual Wednesdays for Ridge students and WAMs. Since a majority of Ridge students, 53%, are virtual, it is important to maintain access and equity for virtual students. Wednesdays are currently the only day of the week that when virtual students have equal access and instruction with their in-person peers. Thank you for preserving the needs and students of all, thank you for preserving the needs and rights of all students, all of the students, and not discriminating against students who are 100% virtual due to their families' high-risk medical conditions. The next public comment is from Yolanda Scribner, 6 Lincroft Drive. Dear Mr. Markarian, thank you to all of the staff for all their amazing work everyone has done. How will students who are labeled close contact or need to quarantine attend school? It has been a little disrupted for a number of virtual elementary students to have just visiting students in their classes. The next public comment is from Barbara Geary, 66 Dryden Road. In regards to the change to the attendance policy, there are 4th and 5th graders in Cedar Hill School going to school to Zoom for almost 4 hours from the cafeteria. This is the learning lab that was mentioned at a prior BOE meeting. There is not a qualified moderator in the room to assist students during this time in the cafeteria. As of today, Cedar Hill is the only school having to use learning labs. We are now being told if my 5th grader does not want to Zoom into their classroom from the cafeteria, she won't have the option to Zoom from home. Is that a correct assumption? If so, how is this an acceptable policy to adapt, considering the majority of the students at Cedar Hill who are sitting in the cafeteria should receive a medal for weathering the storm of this hybrid program? These wary students need a break. 4th and 5th grade students, along with their parents, could easily identify the best learning environment for themselves when you are weighing their homes versus the school cafeteria. I am truly hoping this policy excludes students who are assigned a day in the learning lab, considering it's only Cedar Hill's 4th and 5th grade students. Thank you. The next public comment is from Aaron Flaherty, 37 Colts Glen Lane. The recent news that students will no longer be able to select virtual for the day is troubling for me and many other students. Many fellow seniors that I have talked to today have agreed that we would rather switch to an all virtual schedule if we are unable to attend school from home virtually when necessary. I want to say first that after attending school today, I'm so grateful for all the precautions that have been taken to allow us to attend school in person. However, I think there are some problems with how many students are in the building. There are students very close together when we exit the gym or the building after school. especially after spring break when people may be going away. Many students like me may be uncomfortable attending school with the new travel policy, but now we will be forced to attend if we want to be marked present. With all of this being said, I think that it is not ideal to put into place a policy that will force those who have opted into in-person school to attend every day in order to be marked as present. This action will only discourage students from going to school in person, since we need the flexibility of the virtual option. This year has been very hard for my classmates and I. The flexibility of the virtual option is needed in order to make it possible for us as students to balance the weight of our personal problems of mental health challenges and academic coursework that are overwhelming us currently. The current option for high school students to stay home when necessary, in my opinion, should be continued, especially since it encourages students to stay home if they have any sort of ill feelings. I respect the district's efforts to try and return to normalcy in a safe way, but this action feels unsafe and counterproductive. And that's all the public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Syatt. Mr. Markarian, do you have anything that you would like to say? I know that I think one of the earlier comments was interested in any comments. I have it written down here. I'll find it. Mr. Markarian, maybe, or if anyone remembers off the top of your head and wanted to make a comment, but otherwise, go ahead, Mr. Markarian.
Sure. So I know the first comment I think was about Ridge High School and the color of gowns for graduation. I was just talking to Dr.
I'm sorry, maybe it was the second one. I don't know. I'm sorry.
I think the second one might have been about the calendar and snow
days. No, it was about snow days. The person who wrote about snow days said they were interested in someone commenting on the thoughts on the snow days. So
okay.
But the first was on the gown color. Yes.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Of course, feel free to jump in on any of these. But as far as the gowns are concerned, I was in a meeting earlier today with Dr. Lazovic. The gown question came up. He told me that no final decisions have been made about gowns. And I don't think the school ran a survey about gowns. I think that might have been something that perhaps the students did on their own. I'm not sure. But I know that Dr. Lazovic is working on it. And there hasn't been a final decision made about the color for gowns for graduation. The second item about the calendar, the school calendar, traditional use of snow days. I understand the question. We have built into the calendar, we have one more snow day that we could use. The other two, we used one of them. And now that we're past the February break, the only other day that's scheduled into the calendar as a possible use for a snow day is in May. Actually, it's in June, Tuesday the 1st, which is the day after Memorial Day. So, we've been in a situation this year where if we didn't have the virtual option, we would have been adding a lot of days. At the end of the year, given the kind of weather that we happen to have had this year. It just seems like the perfect storm year. But, I know one of the challenges that we sometimes run into is having days added on to the end of the year and the perceived value of that day instructionally compared to the same day in the middle of the winter in January, February, March. And I know that a common sentiment is that your students are not really well plugged in on June 20th or 21st as days are being added to the end of the year, and perhaps actually having the option to do the virtual days that we've been doing this year might actually be a better way to go in terms of the engagement level of the students compared to where their heads are going to be at on June 22nd. But that's just one perspective. I think that the person that wrote the comment was interested on perspectives about how snow days are used. That would be my take on that one. I think we're lucky this year that we have the option to do it given the amount of snow that we've had. Interesting question about the volume of students in PE class. Obviously, as I mentioned, social distance is one of the challenges. And certainly we can take a close accounting of what's going on in the PE classes. in order to try to make that environment as simple as possible for students. It sounded like that might have been a high school question. It sounded like a high school student. I'm not sure. I didn't get a chance to look up the name, but I can certainly focus on that with Dr. Lazovic, because I think that's where it was coming from, and Mr. Shello. The virtual for a day question, there was a couple questions about that. And you know, I mean, we've been managing with this option for, I guess, at least a few months now, if not longer. And you know, I certainly understand the motive and the rationale for why we were doing it, but it also is one of those can of worms issues. And we've been in that can of worms, really mired in it, trying to make sense of attendance on a daily basis. Having moved out of orange and into yellow, and really trying to bring us back to where we want to be with students coming into school, I think now is the right time to move away from that. With respect to quarantine and travel, though, I can say that students that are identified as close contacts and have to be quarantined because they have been identified as a close contact, the principals move them automatically temporarily to a virtual status. So they're expected to be virtual while they're on quarantine. They're not expected to go to school, obviously. They're on quarantine, so they're temporarily moved to all virtual. With what we just talked about with respect to travel, you know, the paradigm that we're moving away from is requiring students to stay home after having traveled. And we just discussed this and moved on a shift away from that to essentially allow the parents to have a conversation with the school, help the school understand what happened with respect to the travel. And if they make a determination that they want to follow the recommended procedures with respect to keeping students out of school as a result of that travel, we will support that. And the students would not be penalized in any way, because the family is trying to say, hey, look, you know, we were here, we were there. We really feel like, given the circumstances of what we were doing, that we should go along with the compliance that New Jersey expects, even though it's not mandatory. A sentence that I really struggle with. Not mandatory, but compliance is expected. So some families may read that, they think about their travel, and they may say, you know, yeah, we went to, you know, New England area, and we were around less people there than we would be if we had stayed in Berners Township. So we feel perfectly fine having our kids go back to school. Somebody else may look at that travel situation and say, well, yeah, you know, we went here, we went there, we were inside with a bunch of people, we did some things with family. Maybe it would be better if we stayed home for, you know, 10 days and just, you know, played it safe. Or maybe, you know, we'll cut it short to 7 days if we have a negative PCR, and we'll work with the school nurses to communicate what's going on and why we feel the need that we should keep our child home for a quarantine period on a you know, personal decision basis, that they the family recognize the risk that they may have endured, and decide that, you know what, let's just play it safe and keep the child from school for a bit. So we would certainly work with families not penalizing students and allowing students to connect virtually in that situation. The other situation that was described was quarantine, travel, what was the other one?
The learning labs.
Learning labs at the elementary.
Right, the learning labs at the elementary school. So I think the comment was related specifically to Cedar Hill. You know, as I explained in the beginning of the presentation that earlier this evening, we know we have different schools doing different things to try to manage their situation. I think that is happening at Cedar Hill. I saw an email today, something from Mr. Sampola today on this issue. So I can understand that question. I'd certainly be happy to talk to Paul about that and see what we could work out. I think there's some logic to that. I mean, you know, we're not looking to penalize kids here, but at the same time, we're trying to set a standard that moves in the spirit of everything that everyone just worked on for weeks to make happen. And we feel like, a constant virtual for a day scenario just doesn't fit the spirit of that. And when you have the option to quarantine as a close contact or self-quarantine as a result of travel, it makes sense to be able to do that, and we can support that without having any challenges and loss of credit. There was a question about classroom. Yeah, Robin. I'm sorry, Mrs. McKeon. You're muted, Mrs. McKeon.
Sorry. The other scenario people have asked about is, what if someone's not feeling well, or say their sibling has a fever and they're thinking they might have to go get a COVID test. Like, parents don't want to send in a student when they think it might be irresponsible to send them, but on the other hand, the student wants to go to school. So I think that's the other scenario that I think the nurses would have to work individually.
Yeah, I do think the nurses, we want to, yeah. So we're trying not to create a situation where everything, I'm just going to wait for a second. I'm sorry, Mrs. McKeon, you were cutting in and out there, and I didn't hear some of what you're saying at the end, but I don't want to create a situation that's impossible for the nurses to manage. And I think they've got a lot on their plates trying to deal with the travels and the quarantines and the close contacts and the contact tracing. And I know that they're working really hard to advise families and help people make good decisions. And I know that was part of why we did the virtual for a day thing. But I also don't think that, to one commenter's point, will the student be allowed to participate virtually? And we're not going to block students from, especially 612, where that's the paradigm for half the students as it is. They're Zooming in every day because they're an all virtual student, and they Zoom in and they get their lessons that way. And so if an in-person student does that, we're not going to say, well, you can't access your education that way. We're just trying to make a shift away from saying everything is okay, everything counts. We're trying to get back to in school is what you selected, in school is what counts. And that's universal from all the principals, that shift needs to go along with this, desire to create a inclusive in-person environment. So I think there's still enough flexibility, even within the number of days that students are allowed to have the occasional absence, that we're not going to create a situation where kids are having an avalanche of loss of credit because they took one day somewhere and felt like, you know what, I'm going to use an absence here because I feel like it's going to be the safer thing to do. So I think there's plenty of room within the available allotment of days kids can take without losing credit to feel like we're not going to have a huge issue there. So there was a great point about the classroom culture in terms of the environment, what to expect in person. If we have a situation now where hopefully we have at least half of the students in a given classroom that are in person. So maybe it's a dozen kids that are in person and a dozen kids that are, participating virtually. What is that environment like for the student, right? We recognize that it's still a difficult environment because the teacher is still teaching half the students at home and half of the students in front of them, and that, divides their attention. And we recognize that it's one of the biggest problems that I personally feel like that the teachers are confronted with and the students are confronted with, because the attention is divided, and we would rather have a more laser-like focus. And that is part of the reason why we want to maintain those Wednesdays, because it does help the teacher have all of their students in front of them in one place. So it allows them to get through a whole day like that. So we recognize that culture is going to be a continuing struggle as long as attention is split between in-person students and virtual students. And our goal is to get completely away from that by the time we end the school year and continue on into September. And I have heard this question tonight, this idea of, well, tell us what to expect for September so that we can plan. Well, the expectation is that we're not running virtual programs, that we are running in-person programs. I have put this question to the leadership at the DOE in the county office. And I've been told that in virtual instruction is not to be next year. It's not to be. Not unless we're still under emergency orders that are related to COVID. So is it possible? Well, it's a function of these emergency orders. So if we have these emergency orders, we may still have to do virtual. I'm certainly hoping that we don't need to have these emergency orders, and therefore all of our students are scheduled to come in person every day for the whole day. That's the plan. Clubs, I know that there are mechanisms to work with the high school administration and the middle school administration in terms of allowing students to operate clubs despite the situation that we're in and trying to maintain social distance. They just have to work through the school administration to have their meeting plans approved for how they're going to meet. For students that are identified as close contacts, as I mentioned, they would be shifted to an all virtual status temporarily to participate in class that way. And if people need to quarantine for travel, if they feel that's appropriate, then we're certainly happy to support that. I think I mentioned that one also. That's all I have, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Our next item is board forum. Board members, well, I'm going to start with the resolution that Mr. Markarian mentioned briefly at the very beginning of the meeting. I'm not going to bore anyone with all the whereases and the therefores. I'm just going to get to the point, which is that the board supports this resolution, and the I'm sorry, I lost my place here. We request that Governor Murphy's administration take proactive steps to protect the health and safety and educational progress of New Jersey school children and to submit a timely request to the U.S. Department of Education for a waiver of section 111B, so I guess subsection 2 of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 for the current school year. Our board requested that Mr. Markarian add this to the agenda, and I believe we're going to vote on it, even though we are aware that the state has already decided to request the waiver, but we feel strongly about it and we want to go on the record. So I'm going to quickly ask for a motion and a second, please. Mr. Salmon and Mrs. Richmond and Mr. Mclaughlin, could we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Ms. Hira,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Madam President, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. I see Mrs. McCune's hand.
I didn't have a chance to read the whole article, but someone had just sent me this evening an article about the Biden administration making some kind of statement today indicating that they might not approve waivers from states, but that they would definitely approve states having the flexibility to make accommodations considering, you know, the pandemic and testing, and possibly delay some of the testing into next school year and eliminate or like condense the testing to a lot less and stuff like that. So it sounds like New Jersey is going to ask for a waiver. They might not get a complete waiver, but at least we should show our support to get as much flexibility as humanly possible so that it doesn't disrupt instruction.
Anyone else? Mr. Salmon?
I just wanted to explain my vote in the policy section. So I voted no on the approval of the appendices for our restart and recovery plan related to the 2 quarantine policies that were updated in there. I do support the quarantine change with regard to close contacts that are identified. So having the 10-day and 7-day negative test option for travel, I just kind of thought that the rationale underlying the travel quarantine is that if you travel, it's presumed you're a close contact, so that when you come back, you are in fact deemed to be a close contact, and you should just be treated under the same regimen. So I just wanted to explain that I obviously support our restart and recovery plan. I just had an issue personally with that, the travel quarantine rule. And then just lastly, I mean, I think, you know, despite Mother Nature trying her best to thwart our restart and recovery plan, I think today was like a great day, and I hope, I know my 3 kids enjoyed being in class with their classmates that were there, and I you know, hope we have, you know, more progress forward. It was a good start.
Mrs. White? Oh, there you go.
Since you didn't read the resolution in its entirety, I just wanted to clarify, because not everybody might know that what we are asking to be waived is the required mandated standardized testing that in fact we didn't do any of last year, but that we will be doing our own internal testing, such as the MAP tests and any other kind of inventories that teachers and supervisors deem necessary, but they will be able to determine when it is appropriate in their curriculum to do that kind of testing, as opposed to some of this standardized testing, the exit tests, et cetera, that we have been required to administer year after year, and that this is a perfect year to try to get waived in light of all the lost instruction. Now we can focus on instruction and not worry about, you know, how we're scheduling these standardized tests.
Interestingly, well, or not, maybe in Virginia, where my daughter teaches, they have absolutely no intention of not administering what they call their standards of learning. They're proceeding just like normal, and I'm sure they will lose a considerable amount of time to that. Does anyone else have any comments for board forum, either on the resolution or any other topic? Okay, I don't see any hands, so I'm just going to share something for the parents and for the community. On Thursday evening, the 25th at 7 p.m., there is a Strategies for Coping with Pandemic Stress program. There is I believe it's on the website, is that right, Ms. Fox? And there is a Zoom link right in the flyer. The description is discuss the signs of trauma and stress and how to effectively manage these feelings as a family. You can find the Zoom link right there in the flyer, and we hope that many of you will tune in.
We will send it out again tomorrow, Mrs. Gray.
Great, thank you.
Just as a reminder.
I don't see any other hands for board forum. So I guess with that, we can take a motion to adjourn. Mr. Salmon and Mrs. White. All in favor? All hands are up, Mr. Mclaughlin. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a great night. Take care.
Night.